Hello and welcome to our nightly news program coming to you live on All 24 News here from Algiers. Coming up next at highlights. Moroccans demonstrate in the Dutch capital, Amsterdam, denouncing the human rights violations of the Makhzen regime and criticizing the international silence regarding the violations in Morocco. Algeria hosts Africans again at the opening ceremony of the AFCON for under 17 years and reaffirms its readiness to host major continental and international sports competitions. Also ahead in our news, Sudanese army and rapid support forces are racing to declare victory in Khartoum. The United Nations sees greater openness to talks from the two sides of the conflicts. And Ukrainian agricultural exports return to the forefront of events. Kiev protests to Poland and the European Union against placing obstacles in the way of the passage of its products to European countries. Hello again and welcome to the program. First off in our news, hundreds of Moroccans from all over Europe participated in protests and demonstrations in the Dutch capital of Amsterdam on Saturday to denounce the deteriorating human rights situation in Morocco, demanding the release of all political prisoners. Zahra Farjani with the report.
With one voice, chanting, "Enough is enough." Hundreds of Moroccans from various European countries took to the streets across Amsterdam, denouncing the deteriorating of the human rights situation in Morocco due to the continuous repression and the arrests campaign that affected political figures and activists from civil society. Moroccans who are fed up with the practices of the Moroccan regime demanded in their demonstrations the release of all political detainees.
As a reaction to the Moroccan regime, who kidnapped one of our friends from this region, who lives in the city, we also took advantage of the time of this march in order to unite again, without interruption, with our intellectual comrades who are in the presence of shame.
The human rights situation in the kingdom was not the only reason for these protests. Moroccans became vulnerable to hunger due to a deteriorating social situation worsened by a dire economy in the country. Economic figures indicate an unprecedented rise in the food prices, which exceeded 20% in February for the first time in the country's history, while the inflation rate reached 10.1%.
We are aware that these marches and these forms of struggle greatly disturb the Makhzen regime, as well as confuse it in many international forums. We are not satisfied with the marches, and we do not want to diminish our struggle.
For months, Morocco has been witnessing a popular anger reflected by worsening social protests, which were discarded from authorities, who in turn face internal crises and international scandals that exposed the kingdom's immoral practices and exacerbated its isolation from the international community.
Moroccans criticize the international silence on the Moroccan regime's violations and saying the political activists and human rights ones who participated in the demonstration in the Dutch capital, Amsterdam, denounced the silence of international bodies and human rights organizations regarding the violations committed by the Makhzen regime, calling on them to intervene to stop its actions which contradict all international human rights conventions and norms.
The Moroccan regime is imposing dangerous and repressive policies, although the Moroccan people made some achievements. But now the situation is really dangerous, seeing that there are numerous political detainees from different regions of Morocco, and activists are being targeted by the Moroccan regime as they're trying to oppress them and bribe them. The Moroccan regime is trying to cover its crimes by what is known as the Maroc Gain with the European Parliament, just to hide their crimes on Moroccan people.
The League for the Protection of Sahrawi Political Prisoners in Moroccan jails denounced the illegal expulsion of French lawyer Elise Touli, declaring its unconditional solidarity with the lawyer and all Sahrawi civil prisoners. The League called on all international organizations and bodies to put pressure on the Moroccan occupying state to unconditionally release all Sahrawi civilian prisoners.
This is the case. I'm now in Agadir and I will return to France because I couldn't obtain permission to visit Sahrawi political prisoners, not even to see their families. Western Sahara is a territory that is forbidden to foreigners, and this is, in any case, unusual. We cannot go to Al-Uyun to visit the families of the prisoners. And I remember, however, that there are many files still before the United Nations, and we must visit these families.
To a different topic now, Nigerian President Buhari received a message from President of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Ibrahim Ghali, after welcoming his special envoy at the State House, Abuja. President Buhari stated that peace and stability were central to the vision of Nigeria in Africa, adding that these were essential to security and prosperity in the continent, assuring that he would study the content of concerns by the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic and brief the incoming president, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, on them. On Friday, the Spanish government announced the opening of an investigation into possible shipments of Russian oil entering its territory through a third country, and according to the Spanish daily newspaper El Mundo, it reported that Morocco had begun to export diesel to Spain at the same time that it began importing more of it from Russia. For her part, Spanish Energy Minister Teresa Ribera said an initial inquiry showed all documentation was in order for the shipments and the fuel was not Russian, but the government would continue checking.
Faced with the least suspicion, it is necessary to verify if the imported products come from the indicated places or from another country, if there is any irregularity. These concerns prompted Spain to investigate the possibility of Russian oil reaching its territory, noting that fuel imports are theoretically accompanied by documents proving their origin.
To the sports file now, the signal for launching the 14th edition of the African Cup of Nations for under 17 years was given with a distinguished opening ceremony under the title Africa and Youth. The ceremony was held at the Nelson Mandela Stadium in Algeria in the presence of the Secretary General of CAF, the President of the Algerian Football Federation, and other sports personalities. The opening ceremony lasted about 20 minutes and witnessed lights, shows, musical ceremonies and artistic performances, 100% Algerian, amid the significant presence of the Algerian fans before the opening match. The U17 African Cup in the 14th edition kicks off in Algeria on Saturday. This African Championship looms to serve as another bet through which Algeria will highlight its capabilities after the great success achieved by the African Championship for locals. And it also gives a great chance for Algeria to host the next CAN. Islam said with more.
The African national teams meet in Algeria once again. Algeria hosts the U17 African Cup after its impressive and historical success in hosting the African Championship for locals with an unprecedented public presence and tight organization. The tournament witnesses the first-time participation of 12 teams in its history, as the CAF raised the number to 4 additional teams. The competition takes place from April 29th to May 19th, where 12 teams from U17 category will compete for the African title. The three Algerian stadiums accompanied with their fabulous facilities, the Nelson Mandela Stadium in Algiers, the May 19 Stadium in Annaba, and Hamlawi Stadium in Constantine, will be at the center of events to host the 3-week continental junior competition, which enables 4 national teams to qualify for the World Cup of this category. It is seen as another success for Algeria's sports history, seeing this competition's importance. In fact, it'll be a chance to explore many young talents in the continent, considered a source on which the biggest European clubs depend. It will also be an opportunity for the Algerian national team to rewrite history with another African trophy and qualify to the World Cup. CAN 2023 is indeed another step through which Algeria paves the way towards hosting the mother competition CAN, and another occasion that reflects organization capacities of the largest country in Africa.
The Algerian Cubs won 2-0 over Somalia for the opening game of the AFCON class under 17 years old. The Nelson Mandela Stadium hosted this game under the management of the arena referee Patrice Mibien from Gabon, with the assistance of 2 colleagues from the Mauritius Islands and Burkina Faso. The 2 goals were scored by the Algerian captain and striker Anatov in the 22nd and 51st minutes. The coach of the Senegalese team said that the confrontation between Senegal and Congo would be very difficult as both groups are equally strong.
Je pense que ça va être un match très difficile.
I think the game will be very difficult, as being a part of a strong group that includes the Congolese and the Algerian national team. Both selections hire professional football players from Europe, and all these factors will make our mission difficult. We'll make sure to give good performance during our first game in this competition.
L'appréhension de bien débuter la compétition. Donc tous ces facteurs feront que ce sera un match extrêmement difficile.
Fabrizio Cesana, Congolese coach, praised the Nelson Mandela Stadium, which will host some of the African Cup matches for under 17 years old, describing it as Wembley Stadium in England.
On est un paradis.
We are in heaven. Even the training ground is very good. When I entered Nelson Mandela Stadium, I thought I was at Wembley Stadium. Because I like stadiums do not have an athletics track, where the spectators are very close to the players. And I'm very happy to play in a stadium like this.
To the Sudanese file now, signs of clashes and smoke continue to dominate the scene in the Sudanese conflict as the confrontation continues for the 3rd week. Many citizens still wait for evacuation from the country while the conflicting parties race to declare the full control of the city of Khartoum. Samayadi with more.
Sudanese people suffer shortages of foodstuffs and cuts of running water, and acting parties of Sudan's conflict race to announce their control of the country's capital. Death toll rose to over 520 people, with around 5,000 injuries. Battles intensified between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese army, and both of them claim to approach declaring their full control of Khartoum. As plumes of smoke still rise over the skyline of the country's capital, the armed forces affirm their determination to preserve the unity of the state, and they're about to celebrate the next Victory Day in Khartoum.
Very soon, Khartoum will celebrate Victory Day, and the curtain will come down on the end of the worst era the country lived through.
The Rapid Support Forces, for their part, insist that their armed groups have reached victory in many battles against what they consider rebel forces. The Rapid Support Forces also declared that they have controlled many regions of the capital, underlining that their aim is to reach full control of the city.
The Rapid Support Forces confirmed their tight control over 90% of the entire state of Khartoum, and that all roads leading to the state are fully secured by our forces.
Citizens of Sudan and other nationalities are still flocking to Port Sudan, seeking evacuation from the country. Civilians have left plumes of smoke and piles of destruction, with violence dominating the scene.
The situation is very bad. We didn't expect it. Friday we will find, Saturday it all broke. And from that day it was fire in the street, fire in the houses, in the cars. And after 2-3 days from that, the RSF, they start to had shortage of food, water, and power, so they start to invade homes.
Thousands of people from the country have made it out to other neighboring countries. However, more operations are still expected to take place in order to save more lives from the cities that have become a battlefield for the army and the rapid support forces.
Still with the same file, a ferry carrying thousands of evacuees fleeing fighting in Sudan docked in Jeddah on Saturday as countries rushed to get their nationals out of the country before the end of an agreed ceasefire on Sunday. Around 2,000 evacuees, including Iranian citizens, arrived in Saudi Arabia, while several countries have evacuated nationals by air. Some have gone via Port Sudan on the Red Sea, about 800 kilometers by road from Khartoum. The spokesman of the UN Secretary-General, Stefan Dujarric, stated on Friday that the UN and members of the trilateral mechanism are continuing to deliver whenever and wherever feasible, particularly in the areas of health and nutrition. The World Health Organization has stocks of essential supplies for surgery and trauma care waiting to be delivered as soon as access is safe. Partners continue to support the operation of 65 health facilities in 5 states throughout Sudan, providing staffing support, medical consumables, supplies, and pharmaceuticals. Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli said on Saturday that Egypt has not and will not fail to pay any of its international obligations, and it is committed to paying the installments and interests of foreign loans on the predetermined dates. Madbouli added at a press conference that the delay in the sale of stakes in state-owned companies so far is due to the government's concern to get the best return from the sale. Hundreds gathered Friday in the Malian capital Bamako to demand the departure of the United Nations peacekeeping mission. The demonstrators responded to an invitation of their political activists supporting the Transitional Military Council in the country. The Malian protesters chanted slogans against the decade-long presence of the UN forces in the country, stressing that they were no longer required.
The presence of MINUSMA is no longer effective today. We do not think that the MINUSMA came to save the country. We thought that they were working transparently. But if they came for something else, we no longer agree with their presence in Mali.
The opposition in Guinea intended to resume street demonstrations as it announced on Friday that consultations with the ruling military group had failed in the absence of authorities' political will. The opposition issued a statement saying it decided to withdraw from these fruitless consultations and resume demonstrations in the streets and public squares after the failure that was attributed to the political forces in Guinea. After all, the requests made by the religious leaders to promote dialogue were met to no avail amid calls to issue power to civilians and release all political detainees. The United Nations spokesman Stefan Dujarric said that UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres spoke with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Friday about how to ensure the improvement and extension of an agreement that would allow the safe export of Ukrainian grain across the Black Sea. According to Dujarric's statement, Guterres and Erdogan also discussed means to export Russian food and fertilizers to world markets. Still in the same context, the European Commission said Friday it had reached a deal in principle to allow the transit of Ukrainian grain to resume through 5 European Union countries that had imposed restrictions. Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania and Slovakia cited concerns that grain from Ukraine meant to be exported to other countries had ended up in their local markets, which was pushing down prices for local farmers. More with Sofiane Kentouri.
Ukraine's agricultural products are once again at the forefront as Kiev lodged an official protest to both Poland and the European Union, complaining of unacceptable obstacles hindering the passage of its exports to European countries. This comes just hours after the European Commission announced reaching a preliminary agreement to allow for the crossing and import of Ukrainian food export.
Such restrictions, regardless of their justification, are not in line with the partnership agreement between Ukraine and the European Union, as well as the principles and rules of the unified European market. There are full legal grounds for the immediate resumption of Ukrainian agricultural exports to Poland, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia and Bulgaria, as well as for the continued exports without obstacles to other member states of the European Union.
Following the preliminary agreement between Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania and Slovakia, allowing for the passage of Kiev's exports, Ukraine has raised an objection. This comes after a temporary ban was imposed on imports of Ukrainian goods due to protests by local farmers amid plummeting grain prices in these countries.
Yesterday we reached an agreement with 5 neighboring member states and Ukraine how to proceed on these issues as there has been problems both for the farmers in the 5 bordering member states and Ukrainian farmers. So yesterday we found a solution where we would temporarily put exceptional safeguard measures on 4 most sensitive agricultural products, so wheat, maize, rapeseed, sunflower seed. We would do safeguard investigations on some other products, provide financial support package of 100 million euros to farmers in 5 member states, and work on also upgrading solidarity lanes that they really facilitate the transit and exports.
It's worth noting that Ukraine played a big role in saving the world from a food crisis. However, according to analysts, Ukraine's ongoing disagreements with its European neighbors are adding to existing uncertainty in the global food market. The situation is further complicated by the Russian government's recent statement of not extending the Istanbul Convention unless its demands are met by the Western nations.
France will go ahead with structural reforms to overhaul its economy, as France's Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said his government's determination to consolidate public finances was total. The major public protest against a pension reform made credit ratings agency Fitch more skeptical. More details with Salman Assib.
France has witnessed massive protests as Macron has required to push through unpopular reforms to France's pension system, including increasing the retirement age to 64 from 62, insisting the changes are necessary for the system to be financially viable. For his part, French Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire, during an informal meeting of EU finance ministers and central bank governors in Sweden, vowed that the government will push ahead with structural reforms after credit agency Fitch pointed to social unrest over the planned pension reforms and downgraded the country's debtworthiness.
I have noted Fitch's decision. It is based on doubt about the ability of the French government to pass reforms. I just want to remind you that the last months have proven the exact opposite.
Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire, who recently presented a government plan to bring deficit back in line with EU targets by 2027, underlined that France is able to continue implementing structural reforms and highlighted the government's total determination to restore the nation's public finances, accelerate the country's debt reduction, and speed up the reduction of public spending.
I believe that the facts invalidate Fitch's assessment. We're able to implement structural reforms, and we will continue to implement structural reforms for the country.
As Le Maire defended his government's plan, Fitch argued that the social and political pressures, which he said were reflected in the protest against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform bill, will complicate fiscal consolidation, and also warned that avoiding parliamentary vote to push through the bill could probably further strengthen radical and anti-establishment forces.
Political deadlock and sometimes violent social movements pose a risk to Macron's reform agenda and could create pressures for more expansionary fiscal policy or a reversal of previous reforms.
All in all, by this downgrade, Fitch perceives France as a riskier venture for investors than previously. This could oblige France to pay higher interest rates on money it borrows, potentially fixing its debt burden even more difficult going forward. The AA rating France previously had was already poor by the standards of the G7 economy. Now being placed at AA- means it's seen as roughly as reliable as the UK.
And with this, our news bulletin comes to an end. For more, you can always visit our social media platforms as well as our website. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.